Hello and welcome to Young and Digital as we continue our journey speaking to political and business leaders, asking them about their vision for young India. Joining us today is Uday Kotak, Chairman of Kotak Bank. Mr. Kotak, thank you very much for joining us. So, first question, before I ask you about the overall sense of what young India means to you, what does it mean to you as a person? What are the images that connect with you? What comes to mind when we talk about this country which is largely below the age of 25?
I see the young India of today probably different from what I think young India was when I was young.
Okay.
And I suppose that's a part of the cycle as well. But young India of today, I feel, is very, very decisive, has much smaller time horizon, is restless and impatient, and wants everything yesterday.
Okay.
And is far less subtle, if I can say, bold, and ready to say what their mind thinks. And at some level, this is refreshing. It is also coming out of confidence of a more secure India today than what we had 30 years ago.
And what does this mean personally? I'm saying at home, amongst, let's say, family, when you see younger people, how do those connections play out?
I think the connections play out in a sense that when I talk to my kids, we talk more as equals. Okay. And that's something which I don't recollect doing it with my father or my grandfather. Right. Here, my sons believe that they can talk to me as equals. And in fact, we are happy and encourage it. And there is this sense of we know it all with the younger generation as well. At times, I think probably a little ahead of the curve as well. Right. So there is a need for some balance. And as one has learned over the years, there is no shortcut to experience.
Okay. So what are the kind of issues, let's say, your children are engaging with you today as we are at this cusp of change, with a change in government, with a new way of maybe a new order, perhaps?
Very, very cut and dry in their approach. Something is good, something is cool, something is not cool, something is needed to be chilled. So everything is in terms of a very cut and dry approach to the broader political and economic and civil society discourse we have. And I see them having a view about everything. And one of the things which I feel the young India also needs to focus on is having a view on everything with depth versus a little bit of view on everything with contempt.
Okay. So now let me put this in the context of the changes that are happening, right? So we are going through a process of elections, we will have a new government. Now, a lot of things that have to be done in the context of this younger population in India, which has to be given jobs, their aspirations have to be met. So now speaking as a business leader, running a large enterprise, employing so many people, and creating the multiplier effect for other jobs, maybe as a lender, as a financier, and so on. How does this perspective come in?
I would love to see young India do a lot of new things. Many youngsters, I keep on talking about, when are we going to get our own Google, our own Apple, our own Facebook, our own Twitter, created by people from this country and hopefully in this country. And one of the things on technology which I have found, if you look at India's success, it is much more in the field of services and much less in the field of products. I think the creative young India should go out there and create some products which can then be multiplied the world over. And I would therefore strongly urge people to be bold, people to be different, and take your chances, because this is the India which can bloom a million flowers.
Right. So if I were to now ask you as someone who has a position of responsibility in this era, in a way, right? Political leaders have the position of responsibility because they have to create policy which creates the environment to do some of these things. You perhaps have a business leader's responsibility. How would you interpret your own responsibility to address the needs of this new generation?
I think really two parts. First of all, India really needs to decide its priorities. And one of the areas which we really have to grow dramatically is the whole angel investing and venture capital space. We really don't have an industry around that in the financial sector. Therefore, if I was thinking about it from the policy point of view, what does it take for creating significant independent pools of money which are available to angel investors and as well as early stage venture? Because even if we get a low percentage of success, the multiplication of that is huge.
Okay.
Number two, as a part of this, I always like to encourage people who have ventured out on their own and then decide to come back to the formal job market. I think they come with much greater experience and learning than somebody who's really not been out there and tried it. So that's the second thing which I think is a very important factor, and financial institutions and corporates should in fact encourage people who come from entrepreneurship back into professional jobs.
Okay.
Third, I think this is the whole area of what I call as redefining India's priority sector as a bank. And I think policy should look at this. I think the RBI governor has mentioned about this, but priorities have to be relevant to today's times.
Okay.
And maybe angel investing and venture capital should get a boost within the priority sector umbrella as well.
Okay.
And last but certainly
So
not the
you're
least.
saying don't geographically disperse and say financial inclusion.
Absolutely.
Talk about entrepreneurial inclusion.
Absolutely. And as a fourth part to it is what is popularly known as SMEs. Small and medium businesses will be the heart of India. And this is where I would love to see how we can finance, how can we be bolder in that, how we can expand our banking network to be able to be out there for a lot of small and medium businesses, including those started by young people or developed by young people, both in services and even more important in technology and manufacturing.
Okay. So let me ask you the slightly grim question, because I guess I need to ask it. What happens if we don't do this?
I think the biggest issue for us is jobs. And we need to get 12, 14 million new Indians every year gainfully employed. And I would say the single most important agenda for any government has to be to create opportunity for jobs. Now, jobs can be self-employed, can be working for people, can be a whole host of things. And I actually see a huge confluence of what was traditionally called services, agriculture, manufacturing. There is a blurring of sectors, and we as policy need to take advantage of this blurring of sectors and create a flood of gainful opportunity.
Okay. So, and let me ask you one more specific question along that line now. So, you talked about this whole challenge of creating 11 million jobs. New government is coming in, whoever it is and whichever manifesto they own and want to implement. How will this get played out? Because in some ways this is also an urgency. It's not something that is of distant policy making.
Absolutely. And first of all, I would love to see a new government which is pro-business, not necessarily pro-businessman. So that is an extremely important thing. You need to create a environment which is favorable for business and entrepreneurship. We also need to ensure that as we do that, we create a hell of a lot of opportunities across the width of business, both in manufacturing, services, and quasi-agriculture. And through that, through this intermingling, which I think is getting more and more pronounced, where you can't define something as manufacturing or something as services. It is a congruence of jobs. And around that, policy should make it easy. And we must lead to seeing significant growth in the small, medium enterprises across the length and breadth of India.
Right. So, you talked about the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem with venture capital and so on. Now, is this something that banks like yours are in a position to drive individually, or is that something that needs more regulatory drive or oversight?
No, there's lots we can do. And we are very active in trying to promote this entire area of small and medium businesses. But the area of venture capital, angel investing requires a policy framework. Third, we need to figure out our laws around jobs. How are we going to tackle some of the trickier political issues? And finally, we need to see a financial services industry and the banking industry included to get out of shackles of bureaucracy. We are out here, our primary role as a financial services institution is to serve the real sector. And somewhere I feel the financial sector from time to time meanders away from its first fundamental job, which is to serve the real economy.
Right. So now let me ask you about your consumers. I mean, a lot of young consumers, or rather, you own a lot of young consumers, or a lot of young consumers bank with you. How are their preferences deciding the way your strategy is being fashioned? Or if I were to flip that question, how are you catering to this segment in order to own them better for the future?
As I think about it, over the next 5 to 10 years, none of the consumers or the young consumers of today may go into a bank branch. They will like to see some real estate around to feel comfortable, but they will be dealing online. We have started a number of initiatives online, including the Kotak Jiffy account, which makes it possible for young people to open an account in a jiffy and with all the conveniences. We've got a very attractive mobile platform, and for us, digital and Kotak Digital is the way to capture the young minds and hearts. It is the driving force for us. We believe that the banking world in the next 5 to 10 years will move more and more away from branches to online.
Right. So you're also saying in some ways that all the innovation that's happening in this building is being driven by young people out there.
Absolutely.
Or primarily being driven by young people.
Absolutely. A lot of the money today is still with the older guys. So as the younger guys get a lot more of the money, they will become bigger and bigger part of our strategy.
Let me now take you back. I mean, you talked about how things were different when you were young versus how they are for if you were. If you were to start again today, how would you do things, and if you were to do things differently?
In my time, we had a huge amount of time between an idea and an execution. If there's one difference I look at today, that arbitrage is transient. You really have to, besides having great ideas, you've got to be super, super good and fast on execution, because there is somebody out there who will take your lunch if you take too much time on execution. Therefore, speed, time are becoming a lot more of essence for the younger generation and for the businesses of the future. And that does not mean you sacrifice on quality.
So it's easier and tougher, you're saying.
Absolutely. And more, the profit pools of businesses will convert to consumer surpluses, because consumers and the younger people will expect a lot more things free, which our generation was used to paying. So the consumer surplus is back in the favor of the younger generation, and businesses' profit pools per transaction will keep on diminishing.
So one thing you would do differently if you were to start again today as a young Uday Kotak?
I would try and figure out how I can create with 50 people a WhatsApp.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying you may not do a bank, but instead...
I'm fascinated by how technology is making our lives different. I'm coming from an era where till I was 15, there was no television. Till I was 28 or 30, there was no mobiles. So we have seen world without television, mobiles, but when I look at today, the speed of change is enormous. And the way to a business is through some significant movement on technology. Financial services actually is getting more and more to be a technology business.
So last question, I mean, if I were to ask you for a sort of, not like a message to the youth, but really if you were to sum up the 2 or 3 points that you feel young people should keep in mind. Some of them want to become like you, others want to maybe come to you for help, or others may come to you for finance. What is your...
First of all, the young generation, I congratulate you for your speed, your levels of understanding, your ability to be secure and stand up on your own, have a mind and speak it. These are all huge pluses. However, my advice is, in addition to that, please be clear that there are risks out there, and most of the time, the challenge in business and in real life is unintended consequences. So when you decide on decision A or B, please think through all the potential consequences, and therefore think deeper today rather than having to worry about it tomorrow. Keep your spirit, keep your agility, but be alert, think deeper, focus on insight, focus on judgment, and as you go along your path, you will make a few mistakes, learn from them, and get better over time.
It's a good note to end on. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Mr. Kotak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.